Hiya folks. In this lesson, we'll be talking about transforming artwork in Illustrator. This means we'll talk about how to edit, organize, and navigate multiple artboards, the different ways you can position elements, how to easily create repeated objects, and how to work with the Puppet Warp tool. The project we'll be using these concepts on is a series of mock-ups for web ads. So before we get into the project, let me just touch on what a mock-up is. In the design world, a mock-up is a model for a design or a series of products. They help give you an idea of how a final product may look. Let's say you have a product you're selling and you want to see how the different packaging might look for it. Or if you are developing a brand, you might want to create mock-ups to show how the brand would look on business cards, envelopes, card decals, buttons, things like that. They're a great tool for demonstrations, design evaluations, or proposals because they help give an idea of the overall look before you spend too much time and money on developing assets. They also help make sure a client or a team is all on the same page and understand what the end goal is. What we'll be making is a series of mock-ups for web ads. The reason we would need multiple mock-ups for this theoretical project is because there are different types of web ads and all of them have their unique dimensions. So that means we'll need to use different layouts for those different sizes. In this video, we'll be focusing on learning the functionality in Illustrator, but if you'd like to learn more about mockups and the purpose of the different web ad dimensions, I'll link to some helpful articles in the description. So let's go ahead and move to Illustrator. First thing we're going to do when we start up the program, we're going to make a new document. You either click on the blue New File button or just go to File, New Document. First thing I want to do is I want to change my measurement from points to pixels. The first dimensions we're going to work with are for a large rectangular web ad space. So I'm going to set this to 336 by 280. And I'm going to set my artboards to 2. Now by the end of this, we're going to have 5 artboards, all with their unique dimensions. But part of this lesson is I'm going to show you how to edit a pre-existing artboard. So we're going to set this to 2 artboards with these dimensions. We're going to leave bleed set to 0 because we won't be printing this out. I'm going to change CMYK to RGB. If you don't see these settings, then just make sure you hit advanced options. And the reason we're using RGB color is because screens use red, green, and blue to mix their colors. So I'm going to leave my raster effects at 300. I like to keep my graphics at a fairly high quality because I can always downgrade them later, whereas if I need a higher quality image and I made it at 72 pixels per inch, there's just no salvaging that to suddenly make it a 300 pixel per inch document, or at least to make it a 300 pixel per inch document that looks good. So I'm going to set this to 300, and I'm just going to leave everything else alone and just hit create. So now I should have 2 artboards here. And while this first one is the dimensions I want, for this one I want to set it to a medium rectangle web ad size. So the way I can change the dimensions and the properties of pre-existing artboards is I can just go to my artboard panel. If you don't see that off to your right like I have it, you can just go to Window, Artboards, and that will pop open the panel. And before I get too far, I'm actually going to rename these, and I can rename it by just double clicking on the text there. This will help me kind of keep track of what artboard is which. Large rectangle, sorry. Then this one is going to be medium rectangle. And then one way we can go about editing the dimensions of a artboard is if I just click on this icon right here, it'll bring up this menu where I can either name it, I can pick a preset for the dimensions and settings, or I can just manually type in my new dimensions, which are going to be 300 by 250. And then the X and Y position just controls where the artboard is within our pasteboard or work area. These are some different guides to help you with layout and making sure that you're keeping all of your important information within like the safe areas. Other than that, those are the only settings we're going to change for right now, so I'm just going to hit OK. And you can see it shrunk down my medium rectangle. Now, like I said earlier, we are going to make 5 artboards, so I need to start making some of the other ones here. So there are a couple ways we can go about making new artboards. The first method is just go to the artboard panel, hit this new artboard button right here, and then it'll automatically make a new artboard that matches the dimensions of the previous one that was set up. So in order to change everything, I'm just going to click that icon. I'm going to rename it. Let's rename this one Wide Skyscraper. And then I'm going to change the dimensions of it to 160 by 600. That's all I need to worry about for right now, so I'm just going to hit OK. There we go. Now you can see that when it created that new one, it's leaving different widths between each artboard. We can change that here in a sec. Let me show you another way that we can make our artboard. So another way to go about it is go into the Tools panel over here and select your artboard tool. And with this, we can actually click and drag to make a custom-sized artboard. Now the clicking and dragging method is really helpful for if you have a piece of artwork already made and you just need to draw an artboard around it that fits the art piece. But if you're working with precise sizes like us, usually most of the time, what I'll do is I'll just make a new one over here, or I'll quickly click and drag to make an artboard, and then I'll just go up here. I make sure my chain link is turned off, and then let's use 728 by 90 for these dimensions. There we go. And with that artboard tool, I can actually click and drag artboards into different arrangements and in different positions. If you hit escape, it'll bring you out of it. So another way to get to that drawing mode is to go to Document Setup, Edit Artboards, and it automatically selects the artboard tool for you, and you can go ahead and make your other artboard, which in this case, we want it to be 300 by 50. There we go. Now there are a few ways that we can go about rearranging our artboards here. You can just kind of click and drag them into place, and if you have smart guides turned on, that will help you kind of line things up. If you want to arrange a certain amount of artboards in a specific pattern, what you can do is if you want to select multiple artboards, you just select one, hold shift, and keep clicking on all the ones you want to set up. Tell you what, let me do that with these two. So let's say I want these to be aligned along the top. I can either click and drag it, and if I have smart guides turned on, it should help me. But if I don't have those turned on, or if I have a lot of them selected that I want to be aligned, when you have multiple objects selected, it should bring up your align options up here, and you just pick which one you want to use, and it'll move all those artboards into the right place. Now another way you can quickly rearrange them is to go to Rearrange All. You can also get to this menu by going in your Artboards panel and then clicking Rearrange All Artboards. It brings up the exact same menu. This first option will lay out your artboards by rows. This one will do it by columns, and then this one just creates one big long row. This one creates one big long column. So this lets you control how many columns or rows will be set up in these first two options. This controls how much spacing is in between each artboard. This controls what order it lays them out in. So this one by default will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one will go 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. And this is important if you've already drawn items onto your artboards here. If you already have something drawn over here, then as long as this is check marked, whenever you move your artboard, the artwork should move with it. let's go ahead and set ours up for the first layout option. Let's bring columns down to 2, leave the spacing at 20, make sure the layout order is pointing to the right, and then hit OK. And there we go. It's close to what I want, but not quite perfect. So I'm going to grab that artboard tool again. I'm going to drag this up here so that way these edges line up. And then I also need to go over to my artboards panel and rename these so I know what they are for later. So I'm going to name number 4 leaderboard. And then I'm going to name this one mobile banner. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and move the wide skyscraper off to the left here. And I'm going to click, hold shift, click, and then I'm going to move these so that way all these edges line up. So I like this layout, but I'm not too happy with the order because right now it's going 3, 1, 2, 4, 5. If you want to reorder your artboards, you can either just click and drag it, the artboard into the order you want, or you can use these arrows to upgrade it and downgrade it. This order is important for presentation mode because if I had it set up like it originally was, when I go into presentation mode, it will first bring up whatever artboard I have selected, but then when I cycle through it with my arrow keys, it's going to jump around according to these numbered orders. So make sure wide skyscraper is the first one on the list here, then it should be large rectangle, medium rectangle, leaderboard, and mobile banner. Okay, I'm going to call that good. So at this point we should have 5 artboards laid out like this. So before we kind of start working, I'm going to show you how to navigate between all of the artboards. Obviously, there's the traditional zoom in, zoom out, and then use the hand tool to move the canvas around. Or you can use your artboards panel. If you double click on an artboard in this list, it'll automatically bring you to that artboard. So if you just quickly need to jump to that layout, you can. Or you can go down to your controls down here. So this first one is a drop-down menu that lets you select which artboard you're looking at. You can cycle through them using these arrow keys, or you can jump to the start with this one, or jump to the end with this one. And for this particular project, I suggest you go down to this arrow right here, go to show, and if it isn't already, make sure it's set to artboard name. That way it will list down here what artboard you have selected. That's handy for if you're working with a lot of different artboards in one project. It keeps you from getting lost and confused and putting things on the wrong artboard. With ours, it's fairly simple to figure out if we're on the right artboard just by the dimensions. But if you were, say, doing a series of posters that were all the same size, but each poster was supposed to have a different theme, then keeping track of where you were would be handy by just checking down here, making sure you're looking at the right artboard. That's why you want to keep them named over in this panel here if you are working with a lot of different artboards. So there's a couple things we need to do first. If you haven't already, go ahead and download the assets for this file. It should give you a folder, and within that folder should be a frogcolors.asc file and a frog pieces illustrator file. This is going to have some colors we're going to use, and then this is going to have the graphics we're going to use. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Illustrator file. Then I'm going to select all of these. And you can do that by either hitting Command or Control A, or just clicking out the pasteboard and dragging outward. Then hit Control or Command C. Go to our document over here. Hit Control or Command V. And then just move it off to the pasteboard here. Now the reason we are copying and pasting everything over rather than using file place is because when we do the file place method, it flattens it into a PDF. So now I can't grab individual items like I can over here. So I've got my graphics. Next, let's add my colors. So I'm going to go over to the swatches panel. If you don't immediately see that, just go to Window and Swatches. And then we're going to click on that icon that looks like a row of books. And there's a bunch of different libraries we can pick from, but we want the one that I have saved in the folder there. So I'm just going to go to Other Library. I'm going to grab frogcolors.ase, hit open, and you should see it puts them in a panel for me. I actually want to add them over into the swatches menu. That way I can easily switch between my fill and my stroke. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that folder there, and you can see over here I had my swatches panel open. The minute I clicked on that folder, it automatically added the colors over into my swatches panel. Another way to go about it is, if it doesn't automatically do that, just click that folder so they're all selected, go to the hamburger menu right here, click add to swatches, and it will add that color group up here. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now if I ever needed to get back into that library, I can just go to that icon again. You can see frog colors is listed right there, and I can open up that panel once again. Now that panel or that item isn't going to always be in the libraries list. The minute I close Illustrator, it's going to disappear again, but that's fine. These colors are so specific for this project that I'm probably not going to need them again. So I've got my color group, I've got my items. Let's go ahead and move to the large rectangle and start making our layout. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to go ahead and click once up in the corner here, and I'm going to put in 336 by 280 for the dimensions of it. Hit OK, and then I've got my properties menu open off to the side here. If you want to have that panel open to kind of make transforming the shapes a little bit easier, just go to Window and Properties, and it will open that panel. You just click and drag it off to the side, and so that way it is docked over to your right. And then I'm just going to use the align tools that are down here to make sure that it is lined up perfectly with the canvas. And then I'm going to go over to those graphics that we had earlier. I'm going to switch over to my eyedropper tool. And then I'm going to click on the second gradient square right here. And keep in mind I still have this rectangle selected, so I'm going to click that eyedropper, and now it's going to apply this gradient over here. Now the reason I have these two gradients set up as objects within that AI file is because Illustrator doesn't like saving gradients as swatches or in color groups, so I had to add them as items into this file in order to make them easy for you guys to set up and grab. So right now I should have a rectangle that has the gradient applied to it with no stroke. I'm going to go to my gradient panel. If you don't see that, just go to Window, Gradient, and I'm going to change the type to radial. And by default, it should start off with a light color going to the darker color. If it doesn't, you can just hit this symbol right here, and that will quickly switch your colors around. And then to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to go down to my Layers panel. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to name this new layer Backgrounds. And then I still have this square selected, so if you have this selected on our original layer, there should be a little colored square right here. I'm just going to click and drag that up to Backgrounds, so that way it's on this layer. Then I'm going to grab Backgrounds and drag it underneath. Then for layer 1, I'm just going to rename this to Graphics. And I'm going to lock the background layer. Remember, you can lock a layer by clicking in the square between the eyeball and the actual layer information right here. And this will help me make sure that I keep all of my graphics to one layer and I don't accidentally keep selecting the background when I try to move things or edit things around. So first thing we're going to do is let's set up our text. So I'm going to grab my type tool. I'm just going to click once, and then I'm just going to type in title. Right now for these ads, we're just going to use placeholder text, which is a fine thing to do in a mock-up. Sometimes when you are designing a mock-up, you're just trying to figure out the visual identity of something and you haven't quite worked out the particulars of the fine details like the text or the body copy. So using placeholder text just to kind of show what the fonts look like is a perfectly fine practice. So I'm just going to type in title. I'm going to highlight the text. And I'm going to go up here to change my font. You can also, if you have your properties panel, change it over here. I'm going to do it up here. And the font I want is called Mandevilla. This is a font available through Adobe. So if you don't automatically have it installed, you can just go to Find More. It might take a little bit for it to initialize. So once it finally initializes, you can search for this particular font by just typing it in. So the one we're going to use is Mandevilla Bold. I already have it activated, and I know it's activated because the cloud has a little check mark by it. If you don't have it activated, then it'll look like what I have right here, where it's just for like Mandevilla Light, where it's just a normal cloud, and when you hover over it, it will add a little arrow to the cloud asking if you want to activate it. So for Mandevilla Bold, I'm going to show you how to do this on the light one. But the way you activate the font is just click on that cloud, hit OK, and it might take a few minutes for the font to actually be activated. But when it does, you should get like a pop-up like around here that says so-and-so font was activated. Like I said, this may take a little while for it to do. There we go. So I now know that this one, there we go. So I know this one was activated because the cloud now has a check mark to it, and on my other screen here is where I got the notification from Adobe that the font was activated. Another alternative, I know some people have sometimes had issues activating fonts from this particular panel. So another method you can use is if you are having issues, just go to fonts.adobe.com and you can activate the fonts from this end, and then it will add it to your account. You might have to restart Illustrator when you do that, but this is another route to add that font to your project. So once you have installed Mandevilla, use Mandevilla Bold. And then for the font size, we are going to set it to 60, and that's 60 points. And then for the color, I'm going to go over to Fill, and I'm going to grab that dark blue-green and make sure it is applied to the fill and not the stroke. There we go. I'm just going to put that right here for now. Then I'm going to grab my type tool again, add another set of text. I'm still going to use Mandevilla Bold, but I'm going to bring the font size down to, let's say, 15. And then I want to set the fill to that same dark blue-green. Now, you can either type in just a bunch of gibberish right here, or what you can do is you can go to Type, Fill with Placeholder Text, and it will automatically try and fill up your text frame with this Lorem Ipsum text. Now, I don't quite want that many words. I think I'm going to cut this down. I think I'm just going to end the sentence right here, just so that way I have like 2 1/4 lines of text. And then I'm just going to resize this text frame. There we go. Now I want the edge of this text frame to be lined up with this one, so I'm going to select one, hold shift. Then I'm going to go over into my align options, and I'm just going to hit this very first option right here. And then I'm going to scoot this up so that way it's just a little bit closer. There we go. And I just used my arrow keys to nudge that into place. So now I'm going to go ahead and group these, and I'm just going to do that by hitting Control or Command G. There we go. And I'm going to put these sort of in the center. I want it to be a little off center. So the idea is we are going to be putting some lily pads along this edge here, and then putting like one big one over here. So I'm just going to leave that there for right now until we move our lily pads over. Before I move my lily pads over, I want to add a little button to this to kind of show what that would look like on the ad. So I'm just going to deselect these. I'm going to go over here, right click on the rectangle tool, and I'm going to grab the rounded rectangle tool, and I'm just going to make a button. Let's say, tell you what, let's see what 70 by 20 looks like. Okay, I think 70 by 20 pixels is a good set of dimensions for this button here. I think I'm going to leave the fill to this dark blue green color, but I am going to add a stroke to it with this kind of light green here. And then I'm going to use my selection tool to move this over here. Now, the idea is I want this edge to line up with the edge of the text here, but you can see if I use the edge of my text box, even though the text box ends over here, the text actually ends kind of right there because of the size. So I can, if I want to line those up, I can't really use my align tools because it's going to line the frames up, and I want the text to be lined up with it. So I can either just eyeball it, and it looks like smart guides can actually detect where that edge is, which is nice. But if you're having trouble with that smart guide showing up, what you can do is, if you want to be particular about layouts or where something needs to be, and you want to add boundaries without actually adding it to the document itself, what you can do is if you hit Control or Command R, it'll bring up these rulers. You can actually add guides from these rulers. So if I go over here and click and drag outward, it'll create a guide for me, and I can put that at the end of the text here, and then I can easily see where that alignment is with the text. Okay, so there you go. If you just want to temporarily hide your guides to kind of see what the layout looks like, you can go to View, Guides, and you can temporarily hide your guides. You can also lock them here, because with the way it's set up now is if I go to select all these objects here, I'll actually select the guide as well. Sometimes you might want that. Sometimes you might want the guide to stay where it's at. So if you go to View, Guides, Lock Guides, that will keep it from accidentally being moved around when you go to try and select objects. If you are completely done with the guides and you need to just delete all of them, you can hit Clear Guides, or let me just unlock it real quick. If you just need to get rid of one single guide, is once you've unlocked it, just select the guide and then hit delete on your keyboard, and that will get rid of it. Okay, so one last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my type tool again. I'm just going to click once in here, and I'm just going to use lorem ipsum, or lorem. I'm going to highlight the text. I'm going to change the fill to this light green color. And then for the size, I think I'll leave it 15 right now. I'm probably going to have to change it, but it's a little hard to judge how much smaller I need to make it. So I'm just going to switch over to my selection tool, put it within the button here. Now I want to try and put it in the center, but you can see I have the issue where the text frame is actually a lot bigger than the actual text. So if I try to align them, I'm going to have issues. So this might be another instance where those guides might come in handy. So if I just temporarily move this out of the way, if I select my button, I can drag this down so that way I get into the center of the object. I can eyeball this. Okay, so with this one, I think I got close on getting it in the middle, I don't think I quite am. So like, let's say I'm really off and I can't quite figure out where the middle of that object is supposed to be, but I need that guide to be in the middle to help me figure out the placement of this. You can also use the align tools on the guides themselves. So I have this guide selected. I know it's selected because it's dark blue. Then I'm going to hold shift. I'm going to select the button. I'm going to go over to align. I'm going to click on that, and I want to align it to the key object. Right now the guide is the key object. I actually want the button to be the key object, so I'm just going to click once or maybe twice, there we go, to select the button as the key object. And then I'm going to hit the second option here. And there we go, I know that one's in the middle now. And I can do the same thing with this guide as well. Make sure that's in the middle. There we go. And then I can grab my lorem and use those guides to help me figure out where the center of that button is. And then to get rid of them, I can either just select them individually and then hit delete, or I can go to view, guides, clear guides. So I'm going to select this text, select the button, either right click and go to group, or hit Control or Command G to group them. I'm just going to zoom out. I'm going to nudge the button up so that way it is a little bit closer to the text. I'm going to temporarily add a guide to kind of show me where the bottom of that text is so I don't put it too close. I think I'm happy with that. So I'm going to select the button. I'm going to select the text here. I'm going to group this as well, so that way I have an easy time moving it around. And now I'm going to start adding in some of my decorative images. So we're going to grab this lily pad here. I'm going to, with the selection tool, hold Alt, then click and drag it over to here. This way I always have an original over here that I can grab. What I'm wanting to do is I want to have some lily pads kind of arcing around the corner here. So I'm just going to shrink the size of this just a little bit. I'm going to move it over here. Now I can just make a bunch of duplicates and manually place my lily pads, but the problem is if I want to change the size again, if I change the size of one, I have to kind of keep track how much I shrink it each time and adjust them all individually. And if I want to change the arc, I have to move them individually. There is a function in Illustrator called repeat. It lets you repeat objects. So that's really handy for if you have a bunch of the same item that needs to be aligned in a certain way or repeated over a background, but you don't want to create a bunch of individual items. So I'm going to select my lily pad, then I'm going to go to Object and Repeat. And you can see we have a few options here. We can either do radial, grid, or mirror. The option we want is radial. You can see it makes a little circle of my lily pads. I'm just going to move these up here. So each repeat type has a set of settings that you can change with each one depending on how it's laid out. With the radial one, some of the things we can change is we can either change how big the circle is that they're rotating. We can change how many or how far the arc goes. So right now it's going in a circle, but if I click on one of these two halves right here, and I drag that up, I can actually get rid of some of these lily pads. So there, you can see I made a half circle. Then I can also, move this one up. And then this knob over here controls how many are in the arc. So if you go down, it'll create fewer of them. If you go up, it'll create more of them. Go ahead and drag this so that way you've only got 4 lily pads. And I think I actually need to resize this so the lily pads aren't quite as large. So if you want to go in and edit an object, you don't have to remove the repeat that's been applied to it. You can just double click until it lets you go into the radial repeat. And in this case, because this is in a group, I can just automatically start changing the size of it. and it just brings me into isolation mode. And if I wanted to draw more onto it, I can do that. I'm not going to do that at this point, but I'm just going to hit escape to get out of that. Then I can click on the circle to kind of widen out my arc. And I'm just going to move these down here to kind of get a better idea of what's going on. So I'm just going to resize this. And I want my lily pads to kind of be coming like that around the text. So I'm going to widen out this circle here. Maybe bring this back in. I think I need to make these just a little bit smaller. I'm just going to keep messing with these until I get the look I want. And then just double click on it. I don't want them too big, but kind of enough to take up the space. And if I kind of want to get an idea of what this looks like, I can go to Shift F. It'll bring me into presentation mode so I can kind of see what the design looks like without all the clutter of the other artboards. So I think the size is good, but I don't kind of like how that one's sitting. So I'm just going to go back in here and I'm actually just going to rotate it. It'll rotate all of them, but that's fine. What does it look like if I move it this way? There we go. I think I like that layout. So try and manipulate them so that way they kind of sit similar to what I have here. And then I want to add another big one over in this corner here. So I'm just going to go back, grab another duplicate. And I'm just going to rotate this so the cutout is kind of pointing downwards. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Go to the presentation view to kind of see how it looks. And I'm going to space these out just a bit so that way they're not crowding the text quite as much. Okay, I still think that was good. But I might move the text up just a bit. There we go. Oop, I had the wrong one selected. There we go. Alright, I think that looks good for our ad. Might bring this one up just a smidge. There we go. I think 145 pixels will work. There we go. And then I think I'm going to add a bit more text to here. So I'm just going to add on Ipsum, which means I am going to have to make this a touch smaller. So I think that kind of shows better what the button wipe will look like, because very rarely will you'll just have one word in there. Usually it's going to be a 2-word minimum, like click me or buy here, things like that. Okay. So I'm happy with that now. So I do have the issue of my lily pads here overlapping into other artboards. I can just use the layer system over here to just make sure that these are on a layer underneath the content. It's going to go for the medium rectangle and the wide skyscraper, but I can also just use a mask to kind of cut everything off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to make a rectangle that is 336 by 280. Hit OK. Make sure it's in the middle of the artboard. Make sure it doesn't have a stroke on it, but change the fill to white. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my selection tool. I want the white square selected. I want these lily pads selected, so I'm holding shift. And I want this lily pad selected as well. So now I'm going to go to my transparency panel. If you can't find it, just go to Window and Transparency. Hit Make Mask. And there you go. Now it is keeping my lily pads contained to where I had that white rectangle. So now I can go ahead and move over to the medium rectangle. Now the medium rectangle is pretty much the same proportions as the large rectangle, just a smaller size. So rather than creating a completely new layout, I'm just going to grab all the content over here. Now when I selected everything, you can see I selected all the graphics, but I didn't grab the background. That's because I need to go back into my layers. I need to unlock backgrounds. Now I can select everything. And if I hold Alt, I can just click and drag. So that way it goes over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my arrow key to kind of move this into place so that way the upper left hand corner is lined up. Now the rest of it is expanding over the edge of the canvas. That's fine because we're going to go over to the properties panel to fix it. So I'm going to make sure my chain link is still turned on. And by default, usually the reference point is set to this middle square right here. For what we're going to do, let's go ahead and set the reference point to this top left corner. So that way when we change these dimensions, it'll shrink towards that corner rather than the center. So I'm just going to go over to width and I'm just going to hit down on my arrow key and just keep shrinking it. Until it fits in the square. Now I do have the issue where it's still kind of registering where the item's hidden by the mask are. That's fine. I'm just going to kind of move this back over. And I'm just going to keep kind of nudging it down. Let me just zoom in. Let me turn off smart guides real quick. There we go. Okay. So now I can just kind of position this back into place. There we go. Make sure you don't have any white spaces anywhere. Okay, and then I'm just going to go into presentation mode real quick to make sure it looks the way I want. I don't have any hidden white around the corners here. Looks like I'm good. So I'm going to go back into layers and lock that background. So now we have our first two ads set up. Alright, so let's go ahead and work on our wide skyscraper. Now we can't just copy and paste everything over here because it's a completely different dimension, and kind of how we have things laid out over here is not going to work over here, because rather than having something that's wide and kind of short, we've got something that's skinny and kind of tall. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm actually going to kind of create a little scene where we have our frog sitting on our lily pad down here with some other lily pads, and I'm going to have like a row of grass up here. I basically want to create a little miniature scene. So I'm going to grab my frog. I'm going to duplicate it over to here. Kind of put it somewhere in the lower half. Do keep in mind we are going to be adding text and a button down here. So I'm just going to put that into place. I think right there will work for right now. Then I'm going to grab this lily pad right there. Hold Alt, duplicate it. Put it close to his feet. And then I'm going to hold Alt and make another one back here. Now I actually want this one to be smaller than that one. So what I can do is I can just kind of manually input sizes if I want, or you can scale things down proportionally. So like let's say I wanted this to be 80% of its original size. I can just go up to here, get rid of the text, And if I type in 80% into the width and hit enter, you can see it shrunken down to 80% of its regular size. So that's a good way to scale things down proportionally without having to do that math. Illustrator will do the math for you. So if I wanted it to be half the original size, I would just put in 50%. So I'm going to leave that like that for now. Then I want a row of grass and some of these cattails in the background. So I'm just going to grab my grass blade. I am going to shrink that down because I do think it's a little tall. Oop. Tell you what, let's grow this to 110%. I think that's a good height for it right now. So I'm just going to put some grass over here. Tell you what, let's do that. We'll put one maybe like back here. Put one here. Put one over here. You can add as many grass blades as you want. Just gonna try that for now. Right now I've got very straight up and down grass blades. That doesn't look all that natural. Usually grass, it has some structure to it, but it kind of droops, especially if there's a breeze. So I can use the envelope distort to change or to distort them and add an arc to them, but I have some control but not a whole lot of control over how it bends. So what I'm actually going to use is the puppet tool. If you look for your free transform tool and right click, you should see your puppet tool. I'm going to move this over into a floating dock so you can kind of see what I do. So with that puppet tool, or with that puppet warp tool, which is the little thumbtack right there, I have my blade of grass selected. I'm going to hit the puppet tool. You can see it has like these black dots, but when I grab one of those black dots, it will distort the object for me. Now when you have a dot selected, you'll see it has that larger circle of the dotted line there. What that allows you to do is if you click and drag on that, it lets you rotate the pin. And then if you want to add more pins to a shape, you just click where you want to add it, and then you can click and drag that one around as well. So I'm happy with that, so I'm going to switch back over to the move tool. I'm going to grab this one. So again, to use the puppet warp tool, select the object, click the thumbtack, and let's really tilt this one over. Let's put it over here. You usually don't want to get too extreme with the puppet warp tool because the more you distort it, it might do some weird things to some of your strokes. So just kind of be careful as you are moving things around. Tilt that over, rotate it a bit. Now don't kind of fill up this whole background with grass blades. Make sure you leave enough room to leave our cattails and the rocks. Alright, so I'm going to leave the puppet tool there for right now. I'm going to grab this and duplicate it, and that's going to be my rock. So I'm going to put that behind the grass here. So I'm just going to use either right click, arrange, send backward, and keep doing that. or I can just hit Control or Command and then left bracket and keep hitting that left bracket until it moves behind everything. I think I'm going to move this blade of grass up. There we go. I'm going to move this one up too. There we go. I'm going to change the size of this rock so that way it's a bit shorter and rounder. Then I'm going to duplicate another one. I'm holding Shift to make sure that the bottom lines are all lined up, and I'm going to make this one actually a little bit taller and a little bit bigger. Let me turn Smart Guides back on. There we go. I'm going to move it behind the first rock there. And then I'm going to grab my cattails. Let's shrink those down to, say, 75%. Let's bring that another 75 down. Okay, I think that'll be a good height. So I might grab my grass and make them a little bit shorter. Bring them in a touch. There we go. And then I can resize this. Oop, too small. Let me change my reference point back to that middle. There we go. And then I'm going to send this cattail backward until it's behind that blade of grass. And I do want to distort this as well, so with its, before actually I distort it, let's make a duplicate because I do want to add one over here. I'll send this one behind the rock. Now the Puppet Warp tool tends to act a little weird with these cattails, so I'm going to use a different method to distort these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Warp. I want it to be arc, but I want it to be vertical. And I just want a very slight bend to these, somewhere like around 10%. I'm going to do that to this one as well. Except I want it to bend in the other way, so I'm going to make that negative. Might make it a little bit more of a severe bend. There we go, hit OK. Move that over here. I might rotate it a little bit. I'm going to shorten this blade. Maybe move it over a touch. I'm going to shorten that one just so they're a little bit varied, and I'll make this a little bit smaller. So maybe make it 10 or 90% of the original size. There we go. Try and get a look kind of similar to what I've set up here. And once I kind of have my plant life set up, if you want to add some more grass or add more of these cattails, you can. Make sure you leave enough room for some flies. So I'm going to duplicate these and move them over here. Right now they're grouped. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup them by right-clicking on it. And then I'm just going to add a couple flies here and there. So I might add one there. Let me add maybe this one over here. And I'm quickly flipping these around because in the Properties panel, there's a Flip Horizontally and Flip Vertically button. Then I can nudge down the size of it if I want to. And I'm just going to add a couple of flies. I don't want it to be completely inundated. Might add one more. Maybe like right here, up the size on it. There we go. Alright, so now that I kind of have an idea of where my foreground and background is, I think I'm going to grab this upper part. Oop. See, when I did that, it accidentally selected the group I have set up over here. If I just click on that lily pad, it will go back to selecting these. I'm just going to make these a little bit taller. Now I'm going to move him up. Alright, now that I have an idea of kind of where my horizon line is, I am going to go to my backgrounds layer, unlock it. I'm going to make a rectangle. I'm not going to worry about too much where it starts, but I'm going to make sure it starts behind the rocks. I'm going to click and drag, make sure it covers the bottom half of the rectangle. I'm going to copy this gradient here with my eyedropper tool. Then I'm going to go to the gradient panel, and where it lets me set the angle, I'm going to bring that to positive 90 degrees. Then I'm going to make another rectangle, and I'm going to set that up so it covers the top. This time I want to grab this gradient, and I'm going to kind of flip these colors around, see which way it looks better. I kind of like it going from the light up to the dark, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to grab the text from over here, so I'm just holding Alt, click and dragging it over. I'm going to ungroup it. I don't need the paragraph, so I'm going to get rid of that. For this, I'm just going to use the title and the button. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to move the title so it's in the middle. I can just go over here and just use that. I want to resize the button. So I'm going to, let's say 200% bigger. I'm going to bring that over here. Make sure it's in the middle of the artboard. I'm going to bring these a little closer together and then slide that up. And then I'm going to go into presentation mode, which is just Shift F, to make sure it's looking the way I want. I might make my frog and the lily pads here just a little bit bigger. So let's say 110% bigger. There we go. And then just nudge them into place. There. I think I'm pretty happy with that layout. I might just make this like a little bit smaller, so let's say 70%. Maybe not quite that much. Let's say 80%. Shift F. Yeah, there we go. I think we're going to call that good for that particular ad. So for this one, I'm going to make sure that I have background selected again. We're going to move over to the leaderboard one. We're going to grab a rectangle tool, make a rectangle that fits over the top. Let me just put in the normal dimensions. So for the leaderboard, it was 728 by 90. There we go. Alright, and for this, I'm going to copy the gradient that we used over here. Then I'm going to go to the gradient tool. Let's see, it's 90. Yeah, set the angle to 90. And go ahead and just relock the background layers. I'm going to grab a copy of the text again. For this, we don't need the button, and we're going to shorten our text. So I'm going to get rid of the button. I'm just ungrouping these so I can edit them. And I'm going to cut this text down. I'm just using my type tool, and I'm just going to get rid of this last line here. And I'm going to use my selection tool to bring this out so that way it all fits on one line. I'm going to hit Control G. And then I'm going to add some guides to this particular artboard so that way I can see kind of visually where the middle is. So I'm just going to put that guide there, use this align tool to put it in the right spot, click and drag out to make this one, use the align tool to make that sure that's in the middle. If these align tools aren't putting the guides where they're supposed to, just double check and make sure that you have this artboard selected. We added that gradient and the text, so it should already know we're working on this one. But if it's like, say, trying to align to this artboard, just click on this one, then select your guide, and it should move it into the right place. Alright, and then for this one, I'm going to grab the grass and stuff that we made over here. Now you can see when I did that, it's trying to grab the lily pads as well. I'm just holding shift, clicking those lily pads to get rid of them from the selection, holding alt, and we're going to move the grass over here. I think I'll move it over to the place board while I kind of edit it. I don't want both the rocks in there, so I'm actually going to get rid of that one. And I'm going to make these just a touch shorter. Then I'll move them over into here. I think I'm going to quickly group them, so I'm going to hit Control or Command G. Then I'm going to double click on the group to put it into isolation mode. And I'm just going to make these cattails a little bit shorter. There we go. And I'll make the whole graphic smaller. The idea is I want to fill up this kind of side over here, but I don't want to encroach on the text. So I'm kind of messing with the proportions a bit to get the look I want. I'm gonna move the rock up. Tell you what happens if I'm just using, what I just did is I grabbed my direct selection tool, and I'm just grabbing these anchor points right here, and I'm just clicking and dragging them upward to make my grass a little bit shorter. Then, I'm gonna move that fly down. This one down as well. Then we're going to make my rock a little shorter and squatter. There we go. Going to flip into presentation mode. I think I'm liking that so far. I think I will double click to go into isolation mode, and I am going to grab that puppet tool to kind of adjust this piece of grass so it's not quite so distorted. There we go. There we go. I think that looks better. Might add an extra blade of grass in the group. There we go. There we go. Just gonna move this backwards until I can grab that fly. Move that over to here. There we go, and now I can resize that whole group. There, I think that will look good as a little bit of decoration off to the side. Then I'm going to add another set over here. I'm going to reflect it so that way it's not quite as obvious. I just duplicated it. And I'm just going to go in and just edit some of these. So I'm going to double click to go into isolation mode, which will take me into the group. And I'm just going to move some elements around. So let's say make that bigger, move it over here. Move these here. I'm just kind of rearranging these until I get the look I want. You can make your arrangement look however you like. There we go. There we go. Okay. And then I think I'm going to add one more decorative element. I think I'm going to grab one of these. Ungroup that. I just want this fly here, so I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to move that over here. And I think I want to have like a little bit of like a buzzy bee line kind of coming over here. So I'm going to have my fly there. I'm going to edit my text. So that way at the end of the title there's a period. And then I'm going to find my curvature tool, which is this tool right here. And I'm going to start near where that period is. And I'm just going to click once, go up here, maybe click here. Maybe add a point there. And I'm going to do like a loop-de-loop right here. That isn't quite, I don't want it to be filled with green, but I'll fix my stroke here in a sec. There we go. So I'm switching over to the selection tool to end the curvature tool. And then I'm just going to go over to my properties panel, turn off the fill, set the stroke to, let's say, that dark blue-green color. Then I'm going to click on where it says stroke. You can either click it up here or click it over here. And I'm going to turn on dashed lines. And I'm going to bring that down so that way I have a few more dashed lines. I think around 7 points will do. And then I can use my direct selection tool to kind of edit that line a bit more. So I'm going to move this end so that way it's pointing more directly at the period. And you're going to edit and delete some of these anchor points. I just want a very simple loop-de-loop right here, so I'm just deleting some of these extra anchor points kind of get a smaller loop going. There we go, and then I'll just use my black arrow to move the fly into place. There we go. So tell you what, I think that's going a little bit far, so I'm going to shorten up this line here, and I'm just using my delete anchor point tool. There we go. So that here. I think I'll delete that fly right there. There we go. And if I go into presentation mode, I think I like that look a little bit better. Okay, so before I move on to the other artboard, I do have that issue where these graphics are blending in to what's going on over here, so I'm just going to make another rectangle. I'm not going to make it cover the entire artboard, but I am just going to cover up this part. Make sure the fill is set to white. Then I'm going to hold shift, click on that group, so this way I should have the square and the group selected. Go to the transparency panel, make a mask, and there we go. So now for the mobile banner down here, we don't really have a lot of room to have a lot of graphics, and this is going to be displayed on very small screens. So I'm just going to grab the title, ungroup this, get rid of the body text, and then I'm going to get rid of that period as well. There we go. I'm going to resize this, that way it fits more within the banner. Then I'll align that in the center here. Then for the graphic, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this set of waves over here. I'm going to put it over here. Now for the width, I only want that to be the same as the banner, so this one needs to be 300 pixels wide. There we go. There. Now I don't want my waves to be quite so high. I'm going to go over, turn off the chain link, and I want the height to be 50% of what it was. So I'm going to put my cursor in there, type in 50%. And now the wave is 50% of what it was before. And I'm just using this align option to make sure it lines up with the bottom of the banner. Might make this a bit smaller. There we go. So then for the coloring of this, I'm going to select the waves. I'm going to use the gradient I used for the water over here. I have to go to the gradient panel and then set that to not 90, let's set it to -90. There we go. So the light color should be along the top. And I'm going to shift this over so the corner of that E isn't lining up with the top of the wave. It just looked a little bit weird. Then I'm going to go back over to the layers. I'm going to unlock backgrounds. I'm going to select the layer, and then we're going to add a rectangle that lines up with the same size as the banner. We're going to use the same gradient from up here. Again, I have to go back over to the gradient panel, set it to 90. Tell you what, see what -90 looks like. I think it looks better the other way. we go. So I can go ahead and lock the background layer again. Then let's grab this lily pad. And then let's resize it small enough so that way it looks like it's actually floating on the water. There we go. I think that's... I might have to make my waves just a little bit taller. Oop. There we go. I want the waves tall enough that the flower looks like it's actually floating on the water, so I'm just going to make that a little bit smaller, lower these down. There we go. So I'll move this over here. I'm going to shift this over. Then I'm going to grab the button I made over here. I'm duplicating that by holding Alt. Just going to move it into place over here. There, and something I'm going to change on this one is I'm going to change up the text on it. So it just says Lorem. I'm going to scoot this a little bit over. I'm not going to put it all the way over into the middle, because what I'm going to do is within this group, I'm going to grab my line segment tool. I'm just going to create a very short line next to Lorem here. For the stroke, let's apply that really light green color. Then I'm going to click on the actual word stroke, and I'm going to add an arrowhead to the right size here, or right side. And let's use arrow 14 for this. There we go. I'm going to leave everything else alone, but I am going to make the line a little bit longer. There. I'm going to put these two elements a little bit closer. Okay. Then I'm going to have the arrow and the text selected, and I'm just going to make this a touch bigger so that way it fills more of the button. And I'm going to bring a guide down so I can see where the middle of that button is. Make it a touch bigger. And there we go. Alright, so I think that was good, but first thing I'm going to do is let me get rid of this guide real quick. So I have to go into the group to get rid of it. Now I'm going to select all three of these objects, and you can either go to the Align in your Properties panel or go to the Align panel itself. And just hit the horizontal distribute center. It's still not quite doing what I want, so I'm just going to bring this manually over. And I might make the waves just a touch shorter. There. So I think that looks good for, say, a mobile banner. I am going to make this flower bigger, though. There we go. Alright, I think that'll look good. So now if I hit Control or Command Alt 0, it'll let me see all of my artboards. And there you go. And if I wanted to show this to a client, I can either show them the AI file here, or I can go to File, Export, Export As. I name it whatever I want it to be. Make sure I have use artboards, and then when I hit export, it will export each individual artboard. And because we name them over in the artboard panel, it will use these names for the file names when we go to export it. So that is all we are going to do. This lesson was more focused on how we can use Illustrator to create layouts, but I hope you understand how to work with artboards a little better and that you're more comfortable with some of the transform tools now. If you have any questions or you want to share your version of the project, you can drop those down in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next project. Keep creating, and we'll see you next time.